Hi there, Mr. Holcomb here with another episode of The Math Behind the Modules. This is Lesson 17. The line joining two distinct points of the graph y equals mx plus b has slope m. Okay, so in exercise 1 it says find at least three solutions to the equation y equals 2x and graph the solutions as points on the coordinate plane. Connect the points to make a line and find the slope of the line. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to make a table, x, just like we've done in previous lessons. And I'm going to put the equation in the middle here, y equals 2x. So y equals 2x. And then I'm going to put y over here. So I'm going to plug values in for x, and I'm going to start at -2. So if I plug in -2 into this equation, then we're going to get y equals 2 times -2. And 2 times -2 is -4. So that gives me the point, and I'll make another table here, another column in my table, and I'm going to call it x comma y. So I'm going to come up with a point, and the point is -2 comma -4. Graphing that, we start at the origin, we go left 2, and we go down 1, 2, 3, 4, and there is my point. So I will call that A. So there's my point A right here. And I'm going to do another line here, and I'm going to do -1. Or it's going to be the same line, but it's going to be a different point on that line. So y equals 2 times -1, which is -2. So I have the point -1 comma -2 for my x, y, and I'll call that b. So I'm going to go left 1, down 2, and there is my point b. Okay, it said at least three solutions, so I'm going to keep going. So now I'm going to try 0. So my alarm just went off. Y equals 2 times 0, and 2 times 0 is 0. So therefore we get the point 0 comma 0, and I'll call that point C. So that is right here. I'm going to do one more point. I'm going to create one more point. I'm going to go on the positive side, and I'm going to get y equals 2 times 1, which is 2. So therefore I have the point 1 comma 2, and I'll call that D. So I go over 1 up 2, and that is point D. So if I get a ruler out now, because I want to be really neat with my graph, bring my ruler down. So whenever you're graphing, you should always have a ruler handy because it should be nice and straight and accurate. Okay, there is an SMP, and it says to attend to precision, and that is exactly what we are doing when we draw a line like this. Okay, so there is my line where the points A, B, C, and D fall on it. Okay, so now it says to find the slope of the line. So in the last lesson it said if you take a point and if we only change by 1, then our slope is our change in y, or our rise, and this is a rise of 2 and then over 1, or 2 over 1. So my slope m equals 2. My slope is 2. Okay, and that was from the prior lesson. All right, number 2, it says find at least three solutions to the equation y equals 3x minus 1 and graph the solutions as points on the coordinate plane. Connect the points and make a line and find the slope. Okay, so pause the video, see if you can do this. It is identical to the last problem, just a different equation. And see how you do after pausing the video. I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so again, I'm going to make a table. I have x's. I have y equals 3x minus 1, which will yield a y, and then therefore will give me a point x comma y. So again, I'll choose a point like -2. I like choosing values around the origin. It's just easier to graph. That way you're not going way off the grid. And y equals 3 times a -2 minus 1. Okay, I'm not going to show my work here. We've been doing this long enough. 3 times -2 is -6, and -6 minus 1 is -7. So I'm at the point -2 comma -7. Graphing that, I go left 2, down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is right here. Okay, and there's my first point. I will call that A, and I'll label it A here. And I'll change colors for each point like I did last time. Okay, so then I'm going to substitute in the value x equals -1. So y equals 3 times x minus 1. 3 times a -1 is -3, minus 1 is -4. So I'm going to graph point -1. I'm going to graph the point -1 comma -4, and I'll call it b. So I go left 1 and down 1, 2, 3, 4, which is right here, and I'll call that b. Okay, continuing on, now I'll choose the value 0. Y equals 3 times 0 minus 1. Well, 3 times 0 is 0, and 0 minus 1 is -1. So that is the point 0, -1, and I'll call that C. So I start at the origin, move left or right 0, and move down 1. So C is right here, and one more point, and we will have 4 points, positive and negative and 0. So I'll choose 1 this time. Y equals 3 times 1 minus 1, which is 3 minus 1, or 2, and that's the point 1 comma 2, and I'll call that D. So go over 1, up 2, put a dot, that is D. I'm then going to bring my ruler over. I like to put the 0 right on A, and then rotate it so it lines up, and then I can draw my straight line. Arrows at both ends, and that is the line y equals 3x minus 1. And it also said to find the slope of the line. So slope is m equals, so your slope is, now remember from the last lesson, slope is rise over run, and when your run is 1, then you only have to count your rise, because anything over 1 is itself, and I had to go up 3 from C to D, or from B I had to go up 1, 2, 3 over 1, and so forth. So my slope is 3. Now that we've done 2 problems, I'm going to point something out to you. If you go up here, the equation says y equals mx plus b has a slope m. Where's m in this equation? M is right in front of the x. That is our coefficient. So just looking at this equation, that number right there is what we ended up with. That is our slope. The number in front of the variable, or the coefficient of x, is our slope. So this was 3, and sure enough, when we graphed it, the slope was 3 because we went up 3 and over 1. Okay, one last example, number 3. Find at least 3 solutions to the equation y equals 3x plus 1. So x, 3x plus 1, and I could put y equals, but I'm not going to this time. And that will yield a point when we substitute values in. So this time I'll choose -1 first. 3 times -1 plus 1 is -3 plus 1, or -2. So that's the point -1, 2. And I'm just going to do a bunch of these and then graph them all at the same time. And so I'm going to increase my value. So this time I'm going to choose 0. Let me move that up here a little. And so it's 3 times 0 plus 1, which is 0 plus 1, or simply 1. So I'm at the point 0, 1. And then if I choose the point 1, then I'm at 3 times 1 plus 1. Let's not use all those parentheses. It's okay, but it's not necessary. 3 times 1 plus 1, which is 3 plus 1, or 4. So I'm at the point 1 comma 4. Okay, I'll stop at 3 this time. It says at least 3 solutions. 3 at least means 3 or more, and I've got 3, so I'm done. And when I graph that, I get the point -1, 2, which means start at the origin, left 1, up 2. There's my first point, and I'll call that A. And my second point is over 0, up 1, which is right here. Oops, A is not correct. -1, 2. So A is, let me just move this one because it's already red. So A is -1, -2. Okay, I wrote it wrong in my, I have a -2 here, but I didn't have it here. So it's -1, -2. This will be my B, which is the point 0, 1, which is right here. And then finally my C, which is the point over 1, up 1, 2, 3, 4. And that will be my point C. Okay, so then when I go to graph this, I'll get my ruler. And and put this right on 0, rotate so that they line up, and there is my line. Draw arrows at each end showing that it goes on forever, infinitely. And then it says, what's the slope? Well, my slope is my coefficient, 3. And if you check, 1, 2, 3 over 1, up 1, 2, 3 over 1, up 1, 2, 3 over 1, so on and so on and so on. So the slope is 3. Okay, so now that we've learned the pattern here, because math is all full of patterns, once we realize how this works, now we don't need to graph anymore. Now number 4 is saying the graph of the equation y equals 7x minus 3 has what slope? So you'd say, well, the slope equals, and it's the coefficient in front of the variable 7. The graph of the equation y equals negative 3/4 x minus 3 has what slope? And the slope is negative 3/4. Now, it's common for students to say, like if I ask this question in class, what is the slope of y equals 7x minus 3? A lot of students will say 7x. The variable is not a part of the slope. The slope is simply the number in front. So don't say 7x when they ask what the slope is. The slope is simply 7. Okay. Number 6. You have $20 in savings at the bank. Each week you add $2 to your savings. So you started out at $20. Each week you add $2 to your savings. Let y represent the total amount of money you have saved in x weeks. So each week is your x, and you're going to add 2 each week. So repeated addition is multiplication, and having $20 to start with is a constant. So if I write an equation here, it's y equals, and 2x. So if x is 0, it's the first week. I didn't put any money in yet. I have 20 bucks, and that's it. Okay, so that would be 20x plus, or 2x plus 20. So if x were 0, week 0, I had $20. Week 1, I put $2 in my account. Week 1, 2 times 1 plus 20 would be 2 plus 20, or $22. And then week 2, if I use this equation, then y would equal 2 times 2 plus 20, which would be 4 plus 20, or $24. So every week we're adding $2. Okay? So it says, write an equation to represent this situation and identify the slope of the equation. So that was just my explanation. So let me get rid of this. So there's my equation that they're asking for. There's my equation. And the slope is the variable, the number in front of the variable, the coefficient. So my slope is 2. What does that number represent? It represents the amount of money added to the account each week. Not each week. Okay. Each week. Amount of money added to the account each week. That is what our slope represents in this situation. Okay, number 7. A friend is training for a marathon. She can run 4 miles in 28 minutes. Assume she runs at a constant rate. Constant rate. Guess what? That'll be our slope. Write an equation to represent the total distance y your friend can run in x minutes. So I'm going to set up the formula y equals mx plus b. She can run 4 miles in 28 minutes. Identify the slope of the equation. What does that number represent? Okay, so the amount of miles is going to be your independent variable. Okay, however many miles you run, she can run 4 miles in 28 minutes. So we have to find out where to put the 4. Is it the m? Is it the x? And where does that 28 go? That is what we need to figure out. Okay, there's different ways to answer this problem, but let's just start off by our constant. So looking up here at this problem here, we started with $20 in the savings at the bank. The starting amount is your b. So there's a b here, y equals mx plus b. Well, when you're running a marathon, well, you start at the starting line, and that b is 0. So that would break this down to y equals mx, because plus 0 is just simply y equals mx. And we want to find the slope. So in order to get m by itself from prior lessons, we do SADMAP, and we're going to do the inverse operation of multiplication, and we're going to divide both sides by x. And these x's will cancel, and I'm going to get m equal to y over x. Okay, so now that I know that m equals y over x, and this is only true when I have a constant that's 0 in this case, or would it? We'll save that for another conversation. Anyway, m equals y over x is here, so it says she can run 4 miles in 28 minutes. Assume that she runs at a constant rate. Write an equation to represent the total distance, y. So distance is y. 4 miles is your y. So that is going to be in your numerator. 4 is y over x minutes. Okay, so depending on how many minutes it is. So the slope is y over x, or simply 4 over 28. And that will reduce to 1/7. And that is just my m, by the way. M equals 1/7. So it says identify the slope of the equation. What does that number represent? Okay, well, that's how many miles she can run per minute. Okay, she can run 1/7 of a mile per minute, or 7 miles, or 7 minutes. It would take her 7 minutes to run a mile. So now we could put this into an equation form. So since we have y equals mx plus b, and now we know that y was 4, I can just make this an equation now. And now we know our m, y equals 1/7 x. So there's the equation. So no matter how many minutes you want to ask, if you want to know how far she went in 3 minutes, then you could just plug in 3 for x. If you want to know how far she ran in 20 minutes, you could plug in 20 for x, and so forth. So this equation will work for any number of minutes. Okay, so we're going to try this again. 4 boxes of pencils cost $5. Write an equation that represents the total cost y for x boxes of pencils. So slope equals y divided by x. And using this formula, cost is y. Pencils cost $5, so it's going to be 5 in the numerator. And x boxes of pencils is number of pencils, or boxes of pencils, and it's 4. So our slope is 5/4. So in writing the equation y equals mx plus b, then our equation is going to be y equals 5/4 x. There is no plus b because there's no other charge in this situation. So y equals 5/4. What does that number represent? That is the cost of 1 box of pencils. Okay, which is 1.25 or $1.25. Okay, I'm not going to write that, but y equals 5/4 x. 5/4 is how much 1 box of pencils costs. 1 1/4. Number 9, solve the following equation for y and then identify the slope of the line. So solving for y just means to isolate the variable. So I rewrite the problem for starters. And this is no different to anything else we've done. We're used to doing equations with variables and constants, but usually just one variable. But when it says to solve the equation for y, that means to get y by itself by moving everything away from it. So we're going to subtract 9x to get this out of the way. So I'm going to subtract 9x from both sides. And 9x minus 9x is 0. Do not forget this minus sign. Minus 3y, it's still negative, equals, and I'm going to keep this in standard form, so I'm going to put the 9x first, minus 9x, and that's a positive 15, so it's going to be plus 15. Do not add those and say it's 20, or subtract them and say it's 6x. They're not like terms, you cannot do that. And it said to solve for y. Well, we've solved for negative 3y. Now we want to know what 1y is, so we have to divide by negative 3 to get 1. And what you do to one side, you have to do to each and every term on the other side. So this is going to cancel, and I get y. A negative divided by negative is positive. 9 divided by 3 is 3x. And a positive divided by a negative is negative. 15 divided by 3 is 5. So it said solve the following equation for y. Boom, done. And it says identify the slope. So the slope is the coefficient in front of the x. The slope is 3. Okay, number 10. Solve the following equation for y and then identify the slope. So this is the same as 9. Pause the video, see if you can do this, and when you come back, I will show you how it's done. Okay, so here we go. First thing I always do is rewrite the problem. 5x plus 9y equals 8. Okay, I'm going to change the color of that y though. Let me change that to a different color so you see what we're trying to do here. We are trying to get that green y by itself. So I got to move everything away from it across the equal sign using SADMAP, and that is at 5x, which is a positive 5x. So I'm going to subtract 5x, so it is now 0 on this side, and I'm going to subtract 5x on this side. 5x minus 5x is 0. This is positive this time, so it's just simply 9, and I'll keep that y green so we know that it's got to be alone, and it's not yet. And these are not like terms, and I like to put it in standard form right from the get-go, so I'm going to write minus 5x plus 8, because that's a positive 8. 8 minus 5x is the same as negative 5x plus 8. And then finally, to get that y by itself, we're going to divide by 9, and we divide this side by 9. So these are going to cancel, and I'm going to get y equals, and when there's a fraction like this, just leave it a fraction, negative 5 over 9, and I always put the x out after. You can do that. You can move the x outside of the fraction. It's the same as being up with the 5. And I'm going to add 8 divided by 9, or 8/9. Okay, so there you have it, and we want to identify the slope. So the slope in this case is your coefficient of x, negative 5/9. Number 11, solve the following equation for y, and then identify the slope of the line. So now they took all the numbers out, so I'm going to recopy the question. So I want ax plus b, and I'll keep that y green just so you remember that that's what we're trying to get all by itself, and that is going to equal c. So I need to get this ax over here first, so I'm going to subtract ax and subtract ax. Ax minus ax is 0. Bring down the by equals, and again, I'm a big fan of standard form, so I'm going to put the negative ax first, and then the plus positive, whoops, not s, and then the plus c. Divide by b, and I think it's more understandable if I do it this way than I did in the last problem. You can do it either way. They both mean the same thing as long as you remember to distribute that denominator, but here we can just rewrite it and let the plus sign break our fraction. So the b's cancel, and we're left with y equals negative a over b x plus c divided by b. And in this case, the slope is negative a over b. Okay, now I want to discuss this for a moment. This is a standard generic form using variables. And what they're trying to say is, if we take this standard form right here, ax plus by equals c, no matter what a is or b or c is, it's always going to come out to be the slope being this over this and its opposite. So negative a over b. And the other portion, the constant, is always going to be that c divided by b. Okay, so it's negative this over this is your slope, and c over b is going to be your constant. So now knowing this formula, if I just looked up here, a was 5, b is 9, so therefore the slope has to be negative 5 over 9, and there it is, negative 5 over 9. And the constant has to be your c over b, which is 8 over 9. So it's just a quick little shortcut. Once you've done a few of these, you come to the realization that your slope is simply the additive inverse of the a divided by b. That is the end of lesson 17. Review this lesson summary and go do your problem set.